The first time my son called me after missing the biggest night of my life, he didn't ask how the ceremony went. He didn't ask whether I'd been embarrassed sitting beside an empty chair with his name on it. He didn't ask whether I got home safely. He shouted, "Dad, tell me you didn't sell Mom's lake house." That was when I finally understood what I had become to my own family. Not a father, not a grandfather, not even a man they particularly wanted around. I was the reliable old guy with a pickup truck, a spare key, an open wallet, and a habit of saying yes. The strange part was that a man who wasn't related to me by a single drop of blood had figured out how lonely I was years before my own son noticed. And on the night my family decided I wasn't important enough to show up for, 400 strangers watched me give away the one thing my son had apparently been counting on inheriting. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 69 years old, and until last spring I spent 38 years working at Hawthorne Regional Medical Center outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I started there in 1988 as a maintenance apprentice who knew how to repair a boiler, patch drywall, and keep his mouth shut when older men were teaching him something. By the time I retired, I was director of facilities and building services, which sounded much more impressive than the job actually felt. I still carried a flashlight on my belt. I still stopped when I heard an air conditioning unit making the wrong noise. I still knew which automatic door near the emergency department jammed when the humidity got too high. Over 38 years, I watched Hawthorne grow from a modest community hospital into a sprawling medical campus with 6 buildings, a cancer center, 2 parking decks, and enough hallways to get a healthy person lost for half an afternoon. I knew nurses who had started as teenagers and retired as grandmothers. I knew surgeons who couldn't figure out how to reset a circuit breaker. I knew janitors whose names were never printed on plaques, but who had comforted more frightened families at 2 in the morning than most executives ever would. I loved that place because it had never cared where I came from. If you showed up, did your work, and treated people decently, you belonged. I wish I could say the same thing about my family. My wife Carol and I had one son, Ethan. When Ethan was little, there wasn't anything I wouldn't have done for him. I sat through freezing soccer games with coffee turning cold in my hand. I learned enough algebra to help him with homework. I barely understood myself. I drove 8 hours through a thunderstorm when he called from college, because his old Honda had died outside Knoxville. Carol used to joke that if Ethan called me from the moon saying he needed jumper cables, I'd start looking for a ladder. She wasn't wrong. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Carol worked as an elementary school librarian for 27 years. I had good benefits, steady overtime, and eventually a solid retirement account. We bought a brick ranch house in Matthews when Ethan was 4. We stayed there even after my promotions, because neither of us cared about impressing anybody. When friends moved into bigger houses, Carol planted roses. When coworkers bought boats, I built a deck. When Ethan complained that every other family seemed to take expensive vacations, we loaded our camping gear into the truck and drove to the Smokies. He used to love those trips. At least I think he did. The one extravagance Carol and I ever allowed ourselves came when I was 52. We bought a small 2-bedroom cabin on Lake Norman. Nothing fancy. The siding needed paint, the dock leaned a little, and the kitchen looked like it had survived several generations of bad decorating decisions. But the first evening we sat on that porch watching the sun turn the water orange, Carol took my hand and whispered, "This is the first thing we've ever bought just because we wanted it." I never forgot that. Neither did Ethan. He was 21 then, and the cabin became the place where our family seemed happiest. Summer cookouts, 4th of July fireworks, Thanksgiving weekends when the weather stayed warm. Ethan proposed to his future wife, Brooke, on our dock. Carol helped decorate the porch with string lights. I grilled steaks, Brooke cried. Ethan cried, even I cried, though I blamed the smoke. For years, I assumed that cabin would always mean family. Then Carol got sick, ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. You learn a lot about people when someone you love is dying. You learn who can sit beside a hospital bed without needing to say anything. You learn who calls because they care, and who calls because silence makes them uncomfortable. You learn that casseroles arrive faster than courage. Most of all, you learn that time becomes brutally honest when you know there's less of it left. Carol lasted 11 months. Ethan was 34. He came around often at first. Brooke came less. She said hospitals made her anxious. I understood. Everyone handles illness differently. As Carol grew weaker, Ethan's visits became shorter. Sometimes he'd stand in the doorway checking his phone while his mother tried to ask about work. Once, after he left, Carol looked at me and said, "Don't be angry with him." I wasn't. "He's scared," she whispered. "Some people run toward pain. Some run away from it." 3 nights before she died, Carol made me promise something. "Don't spend whatever years you have left waiting for Ethan to need you," she said. I tried to joke. "What else am I supposed to do?" She looked at me with that expression wives develop after 40 years of knowing exactly when their husbands are hiding behind humor. "Live, Robert." I didn't understand how hard that would become until she was gone. For the first year after her funeral, Ethan called regularly. Every Sunday at first, then every other Sunday. Then whenever he remembered, I told myself he was busy. He and Brooke had 2 children by then, Logan and Mia. Their lives were full of school activities, travel, baseball, dance lessons, birthday parties, work deadlines, and Brooke's enormous family. Brooke had parents who lived 20 minutes away, 2 sisters, a brother, 4 nieces, 3 nephews, and enough cousins to fill a restaurant. Every holiday seemed to belong to them. Christmas Eve was with Brooke's parents. Christmas morning was just for the kids. Easter belonged to her sister. Memorial Day became a neighborhood lake weekend. Mother's Day obviously belonged to Brooke and her mother. Father's Day usually involved Ethan taking his own kids somewhere. I kept hearing the same sentence. "Dad, we'll do something another weekend." Another weekend became a phrase large enough to swallow entire years. I didn't complain. I didn't want to be the lonely widower who made his son feel guilty. Instead, I made myself useful. When Ethan's water heater burst, I drove over at 7 in the morning. When Brooke needed someone to pick Mia up from dance because she was getting her hair done before a charity dinner, I went. When Logan's baseball team needed a sponsor for new uniforms, I quietly covered the shortage. When their golden retriever needed emergency surgery and Ethan said the timing was terrible, I paid the vet. When they wanted to use the lake cabin for Brooke's sister's 40th birthday, I handed over the keys. When they wanted it again for Memorial Day, I said yes. When they wanted it for Labor Day, I said yes again. The strange thing was, I almost never went with them. "It's mostly Brooke's family this time, Dad." Or, "There won't really be enough beds." Or my favorite, "You probably wouldn't enjoy how loud the kids are." It was my cabin, but somehow I had become the person who didn't fit there. The first moment I can clearly remember feeling like an outsider happened on Thanksgiving 3 years after Carol died. I hosted everyone because Ethan said Brooke's parents were renovating their kitchen. I got up at 5:30 to start the turkey. I made Carol's cornbread stuffing from a recipe card written in her handwriting. I bought the expensive ham Brooke's father liked. I moved furniture so 17 people could fit inside my dining and living rooms. Brooke arrived carrying 2 bottles of wine and immediately began rearranging everything. "The kids' table should go over there." "Robert, do you have nicer serving spoons?" "Robert, that tablecloth looks a little old-fashioned." At one point, I went into my own bedroom and laughed because the alternative was getting angry. Carol would have said something, not cruel, just sharp enough to remind everyone whose house they were standing in. I missed her terribly that day. Dinner itself went fine. Everybody ate, everybody laughed. Brooke's father told the same golf story twice. Ethan barely spoke to me because he was discussing a ski trip with Brooke's brother. After dessert, Brooke stood near the fireplace and said, "Okay, family picture." Everyone crowded together. I started walking toward them. Brooke handed me her phone. "Robert, would you mind taking it? You're so much better at getting everyone in." I looked at the group. Ethan was there. My grandchildren were there. Brooke's parents were there. Her sisters, her brother, their spouses, even Brooke's cousin, who had shown up 2 hours late with a store-bought pie. I was the only person not in the picture. I actually thought she had made a mistake. "You don't want me in one?" I asked. Brooke gave me a quick smile. "Oh, we'll do another. I just want one of the immediate family first." Immediate family, in my house, beside my fireplace. After eating the turkey I had cooked from 5:30 that morning, Ethan heard her. I know he did because his eyes met mine for half a second. I waited for him to say, "Dad, get in here." He didn't. He looked away. So I took the picture. 3 of them, actually, because Brooke didn't like the first 2. She posted the best one online before they left. Her caption said, "So grateful for family tradition and the people who always show up." I stared at those words for a long time after everyone went home. Then I looked around at 17 dirty plates, wine glasses on the coffee table, napkins under chairs, and a roasting pan soaking in the sink. Nobody had stayed to help clean. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Carol's empty chair across from me. That was the first Thanksgiving I admitted something was wrong. Not with Ethan's schedule, not with Brooke's personality, with me. I had trained everyone I loved to believe I would accept whatever scraps of attention they offered, as long as they occasionally called me dad. But admitting it and changing it were two different things. For another 2 years, I kept saying yes. I said yes because of Logan and Mia. I said yes because I missed Ethan. I said yes because I heard Carol's voice telling me not to react while I was hurting. Somewhere along the way, though, patience turned into permission. That became painfully obvious when Mia had her middle school awards ceremony. She called me herself. "Grandpa, I'm getting something, but Mom won't tell me what." I promised I'd be there. 2 days before the ceremony, Ethan called. "Dad, small problem. They only gave us 4 tickets." "Okay." Brooke's parents already planned on going. I waited. And obviously Brooke and I. 4 people. None of them me. "Mia invited me," I said. "I know. She's 12. She didn't realize there was a ticket limit." I could hear him trying to make it sound reasonable. "We'll send you the video." "All right." He sounded relieved. "Thanks for understanding." That phrase had become his version of goodbye. Thanks for understanding meant please don't make me feel bad. Thanks for understanding meant your disappointment is inconvenient. Thanks for understanding meant I expect you to absorb whatever decision is easiest for me. That night, Mia texted me a picture holding her academic achievement medal. Under it, she wrote, "Wish you were here, Grandpa." I saved that message. A month later, Brooke asked whether I could keep the kids for a weekend because she and Ethan had reservations at a resort in Asheville. I almost said no. Almost. Then Mia got on the phone. "Please, Grandpa." I said yes. Of course I did. That's who I was back then. Around that same time, someone else started appearing in my life more often. His name was Owen Parker. Owen was 41, 3 years younger than Ethan. His father, David Parker, had worked with me at Hawthorne for 26 years. David was the closest thing I ever had to a brother. We weren't alike. I was careful. David was loud. I planned. David improvised. I saved money. David could walk into a hardware store for screws and come out with a smoker, a fishing pole, and a story about how the cashier's uncle once met Willie Nelson. Somehow we fit. When Carol was sick, David showed up constantly. He mowed my lawn without asking. He sat in hospital cafeterias with me at midnight. He once drove 40 miles because I mentioned during a phone call that the porch light had burned out, and I hadn't had time to change it. "You drove 40 miles for a light bulb?" I asked. "No," he said. "I drove 40 miles because my friend sounds exhausted. The light bulb just gave me an excuse." That's the kind of man he was. David died unexpectedly from a massive stroke when Owen was 23. The night it happened, Owen sat beside me in the hospital waiting room, looking like a little boy trapped inside a grown man's body. David never woke up, so there was no dramatic deathbed promise between us. Life rarely arranges itself that neatly, but standing beside his coffin 4 days later, I made one anyway. I told him I'd keep an eye on his boy. Owen didn't need much. He was stubborn like his father. He finished a construction management degree, worked for a commercial builder, then surprised everyone by leaving a higher-paying job to teach carpentry and robotics at a public technical high school. "Teenagers make more sense than contractors," he told me. "That's the dumbest thing you've ever said," I replied. He laughed exactly like David. Over the years, Owen became the person who showed up without being managed. When Carol died, he arrived at my house with groceries and never once asked me to talk about my feelings. He simply repaired the loose railing on the deck while I sat outside drinking coffee. When my truck battery died, he appeared with jumper cables. When I had cataract surgery, he took the day off to drive me home. I told him Ethan could have done it. The truth was, I hadn't asked Ethan because he'd mentioned being overwhelmed at work. Owen never knew that. He just said, "You'd do it for me." Every Christmas, Owen brought me a loaf of cinnamon bread his wife made. Every year on David's birthday, we drank one beer on my porch and told the same stories about him. He never called me dad. I never wanted him to. He had a father, a good one. But there are relationships that don't need a label to become family. By the beginning of my final year at Hawthorne, the hospital administration had decided to turn my retirement into something much larger than I wanted. Apparently 38 uninterrupted years had become unusual enough to impress people. The hospital foundation was opening a new workforce training program for young adults interested in electrical work, HVAC, carpentry, medical equipment maintenance, and other skilled trades. Because I had spent decades mentoring apprentices, they wanted to announce the program during my retirement celebration. There would be local television coverage. Former employees were coming back. Someone had dug through old photo albums. They even wanted Carol's picture included in the presentation because, as our hospital president told me, no one works 38 years without someone at home carrying part of the weight. That sentence nearly broke me. The event was scheduled for a Saturday evening at a hotel ballroom in Charlotte. I received 6 family invitations. I only needed 3. One for Ethan, one for Brooke, and one each for Logan and Mia if they wanted to come. I drove to Ethan's house to give him the envelope personally. He was in the driveway polishing a black SUV that cost more than my first house. Brooke was sitting on the porch scrolling through her phone. "What's this?" Ethan asked. "Retirement dinner." He opened the invitation. "Whoa, they're doing all this for you?" Apparently nobody could convince them a sheet cake in the maintenance shop was enough. He laughed. "Dad, this is huge." Brooke looked up. "What date?" I told her. Her expression changed for less than a second. I noticed because I had gotten very good at noticing. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I thought that was the weekend of my cousin's Napa trip, but that's the week after." Ethan put an arm around me. "We'll be there." "You sure?" "Dad." He looked almost offended. "Of course. 38 years? We wouldn't miss that." I wanted to believe him, so I did. I even gave the event coordinator Ethan's name for the chair directly beside mine. 2 weeks before the dinner, Brooke called asking about the Lake Norman cabin. Her sister wanted to host a girls' weekend. We were thinking Friday through Monday. "Which weekend?" she told me. "It was the weekend after my retirement dinner." "That's fine," I said. "I'll leave the keys where I usually do." "You're the best." She hung up without asking how I was. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, thinking about Thanksgiving, Mia's ceremony, all the weekends I had been told there wasn't room for me at my own cabin. Then something inside me became very quiet. Not angry, quiet. Carol used to say that was when I made my biggest decisions. 3 days later, I drove to the lake alone. I opened every window. I walked through the little kitchen where Carol used to dance when old Motown songs came on the radio. I ran my hand across the doorframe where we had marked Logan and Mia's heights in pencil. I sat on the dock where Ethan had proposed to Brooke. I cried there for the first time in months. Not because the cabin was only a building, because I finally understood I had spent years preserving a place for a family that no longer preserved a place for me. I had already been approached by a retired couple who lived 2 houses down. They had asked several times whether I'd ever consider selling. Their daughter wanted to move closer with her children. I had always said no. That afternoon, I walked next door and said, "Are you still interested?" We agreed on a price within a week. No battle, no drama, no secret scheme. I didn't sell it to punish Ethan. I sold it because every time I drove there, I was maintaining somebody else's vacation property while sitting alone on the porch, remembering a woman who had told me to live. After paying off the small remaining balance and expenses, I would have a little over $400,000. I didn't need it. My house was paid off. My pension was solid. My retirement savings were more than enough for a man who still thought $20 was too much for a haircut. So I made a choice. Owen's Technical High School had been trying for years to build a proper trades workshop. Their equipment was old. Students shared tools. The robotics team held fundraisers just to afford replacement parts. Hawthorne's new workforce program needed a community partner. The answer seemed so obvious that I wondered why I hadn't seen it earlier. I met privately with the hospital foundation and the school district. I offered most of the cabin proceeds to the project under one condition. I didn't want the building named after me. I wanted it named after David Parker. David had spent 26 years fixing everything from oxygen line alarms to broken cafeteria equipment. He believed useful work mattered whether anyone applauded it or not. I wanted teenagers walking into that workshop to know his name. The hospital agreed to match part of my contribution. Several vendors joined in. What began as my $400,000 became a project worth nearly $700,000. I told nobody in my family. Not because it was a secret, because for once, I wanted to make a decision about my own life without holding a family meeting, so people could explain how my resources might someday benefit them. 24 hours before my retirement dinner, Ethan called. I was ironing the only dark suit I owned. "Hey, Dad." I immediately heard airport noise behind him. "Where are you?" I asked. He hesitated. "So, funny story." My stomach sank before he said another word. Brooke's cousin had found a last-minute deal for Napa Valley. The trip had been moved forward. A group was flying out Friday night and returning Monday. Tonight? I asked. Yeah. My dinner is tomorrow. I know. There was silence. Then Brooke's voice floated through the background. Just tell him, Ethan sighed. Dad, it's not like I'm missing your actual retirement. You already stopped working last week. I stared at the suit hanging from my kitchen cabinet. The dinner is the retirement. You know what I mean, it's a company thing. Company thing. 38 years of my life reduced to a company thing. He continued quickly. There'll be hundreds of people there. You'll barely notice we're missing. The chair beside me has your name on it. Another silence. Dad, please don't do that. Do what? Make me feel guilty. I almost laughed. I told Brooke you'd understand. There it was. Understand. The word that had excused everything for years. It's not a wedding, Brooke called loudly enough for me to hear. And it's not a funeral. Ethan lowered his voice. She's just saying there will be other events. I looked toward Carol's photograph on the refrigerator. There won't always be other events, I thought, but I didn't say it. Enjoy Napa, I said. Ethan sounded relieved instantly. I knew you'd get it. Have a safe flight. We'll take you somewhere nice next weekend. Sure. Love you, Dad. The words sounded automatic. Love you too, son. When the call ended, I didn't move for several minutes. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. Thank you for being cool about this. We really need some adult time, lol. Please don't make Ethan feel bad. He's been stressed. I read it twice. Then I opened my contacts and called Owen. Mr. Hayes? You busy tomorrow night? Depends. I've got a retirement dinner. I know. Congratulations. My son can't make it. Silence. Owen didn't say he was sorry in that soft voice people use when they're actually curious about what happened. He simply asked, what time should I be there? My throat tightened. 6. I'll be there at 5:30. You don't even know where it is. Text me the address. That was it. No checking with anyone. No asking whether it would be awkward. No complaining about short notice. Owen. Yeah? Thank you. His voice softened. You showed up for every important day of my life after my dad died. Let me get one. I had to sit down after we hung up. The next morning, Ethan and Brooke were already posting photographs from California. Airport champagne, vineyard views, a black rental convertible. Brooke posted a picture of Ethan holding a wine glass with the caption, "Protect your peace. Life is too short to live for other people's expectations." I almost admired the irony. At 5:20 that evening, Owen was standing outside the hotel ballroom in a charcoal suit and a tie that looked like his wife had chosen it. You're early, I said. You told me 6. Normal people arrive at 6. My father raised me better. We both laughed. Then he handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was David's old pocket knife. I recognized it immediately. Brown handle, scratched brass, one blade slightly bent from the time he tried to pry open something he shouldn't have. I found it in a drawer, Owen said. Dad carried it at Hawthorne for years. I thought maybe tonight you should have it. I couldn't speak. You sure? Yeah. He smiled. 2 stubborn old maintenance guys should probably stay together. I put the knife in my jacket pocket. The ballroom doors opened. Nearly 400 people were inside. Nurses, technicians, maintenance workers, former administrators, hospital board members, retired employees, neighbors, friends. 3 giant screens displayed photographs from my life at Hawthorne. There was 23-year-old me covered in grease beside an ancient boiler. There was Carol at a hospital picnic holding baby Ethan. There was David standing on a ladder wearing a Santa hat during a Christmas toy drive. I saw people I hadn't thought about in decades. The front table had 4 seats. Mine, Ethan's, Brooke's, and one marked guest. I stopped when I saw Ethan's name. Owen noticed. I can sit somewhere else, he whispered. No. I removed Ethan's name card, folded it once, put it in my pocket, and placed Owen's card beside mine. Sit with me. He looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hayes. Robert, that's your son's seat. Tonight it's the seat of the person who came. He sat down. At 6:30 the lights dimmed. The hospital president, Dr. Margaret Ellis, took the stage. I had known Margaret for more than 20 years. She began as an emergency room physician and somehow became the sort of administrator employees still trusted, which I considered a medical miracle. She talked about my 38 years. She told embarrassing stories about me sleeping in the mechanical room during a hurricane because I refused to leave while the backup generators were running. A nurse described the night I built a wooden step so a dying patient's 6-year-old daughter could climb onto his hospital bed safely. A security officer reminded everyone that I had spent 10 winters carrying jumper cables because staff batteries always died after night shift. None of those things felt important when I did them. Hearing them repeated made me realize a life isn't always measured by its biggest moments. Sometimes it's measured by how many small problems became lighter because you happened to be there. Then Margaret looked toward the empty place where my family was supposed to sit. "Robert," she said, "I know Carol would have been very proud tonight." I nodded because speaking was impossible. "And I see someone beside you who looks familiar." The camera turned toward Owen. His eyes widened in panic. I laughed. Margaret invited me to explain. I walked to the microphone. "That's Owen Parker," I said. A few older employees immediately began applauding because they recognized the last name. His father, David, worked here for 26 years. He was my best friend. He was the man who showed up whenever life got ugly, usually carrying tools I didn't ask for and opinions I definitely didn't ask for. People laughed. Owen wiped his eyes. When David died, Owen was young. I tried to look after him. Somewhere along the way, I think he started looking after me. The room grew quiet. I looked directly at Owen. "My family couldn't be here tonight. Owen could. Sometimes the people who love you most aren't the people who share your name. They're the people who make room for you without needing to be reminded." The applause began slowly and then filled the ballroom. Owen lowered his head. I returned to my seat believing that would be the most emotional moment of the night. I was wrong. Margaret stepped back to the podium. "Robert thinks we're finished." I looked up. She smiled. "We're not." Behind her, the screens changed. A rendering appeared of a bright workshop filled with workbenches, computer stations, electrical training panels, robotics equipment, welding booths, and classrooms. Across the top were the words David Parker, Center for Skilled Trades and Technology. Owen stopped breathing. Margaret explained that Hawthorne had been planning a workforce partnership with local high schools. Then she said my name. She told the room I had contributed more than $400,000 from the sale of a personal property and that the hospital foundation, local suppliers, and community donors had expanded the project to nearly $700,000. Owen turned toward me. "You sold the cabin?" he whispered. I nodded. His face crumpled before Margaret even announced that Owen would serve on the program's advisory team and that his students would be among the first to use the facility. Then Margaret said something I hadn't expected. "Robert refused to let us put his name on the building. He told us, 'A name doesn't belong on a wall just because it paid for bricks. Put the name of a man on it who taught me what showing up actually means.'" The entire ballroom stood. Owen covered his face. I stayed seated because my knees suddenly felt unreliable. He leaned over and hugged me, not politely, not for the cameras, but the way a son hugs a father when neither of them cares who's watching. Somewhere across the country, that moment began spreading online. A local reporter posted the clip. Then another station picked it up. By the time dessert arrived, my phone was vibrating continuously inside my jacket. I didn't look at it. For once, the people in front of me mattered more than whoever was trying to reach me through a screen. I talked to old coworkers. I hugged nurses. I listened to stories about David. Owen introduced me to 2 former students who had driven from Raleigh after hearing about my retirement. At 10:30, I finally got home. I loosened my tie, placed David's pocket knife beside Carol's photograph, and made coffee even though I knew I shouldn't drink caffeine that late. Then I checked my phone. 67 missed calls. 21 from Ethan. 11 from Brooke. The rest from relatives, coworkers, unknown numbers, and a few reporters. There were dozens of texts. The first message from Ethan had been sent while the ceremony was still happening. "Dad, call me ASAP." Then, "Did you seriously sell the lake house?" Then, "Why didn't you tell us?" Then, "Brooke is freaking out." Then, "That cabin was part of our family." Then, "Please tell me the news report is wrong." Not one message said, "Congratulations." Not one asked whether I had enjoyed my retirement dinner. Not one said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." At 10:47, he called again. I answered. "Hello." "Dad." His voice was frantic. "Please tell me you didn't sell Mom's cabin." I looked at Carol's photograph. "Good evening to you too." "I'm serious." "So am I." "Did you sell it?" "Yes." Silence. Why? Because I wanted to. That's not an answer. It's actually the entire answer. I heard Brooke in the background. Ask him when. Ethan said, when did you decide this? Several weeks ago. Before tonight? Obviously. And you weren't going to tell me? You would have found out eventually. He exhaled sharply. Dad, we talked about that place. We did? You always said it was for family. It was. So what happened? I almost said, you happened. Brooke happened. Thanksgiving happened. Mia's ceremony happened. Years happened. Instead, I asked a simpler question. Ethan, how was Napa? He went quiet. What does that have to do with anything? Probably less than the cabin. He knew exactly what I meant. Brooke grabbed the phone. Robert, we need to clear something up. Hello, Brooke. You cannot make a financial decision like this just because you're upset that we missed one dinner. There it was. One dinner. I felt something inside me finally detach. I didn't sell the cabin because you missed my retirement dinner. Then why? Because I'm tired of maintaining a life everybody enjoys without me. She laughed once sharply. That's dramatic. Maybe. Ethan grew up there. So did a lot of memories. Logan and Mia love that place. I know. You didn't think about how this affects them? I thought about it carefully. So you gave away their inheritance to strangers? That word hit harder than she intended. Strangers. Students I had never met were strangers. Owen was apparently a stranger. Yet Brooke's parents, siblings, cousins, friends, and whoever happened to be invited to my cabin that weekend had always somehow counted as family. Brooke, I said, the first thing you asked me about tonight was property. She stopped talking. You didn't ask how my retirement dinner went. You didn't ask whether I was hurt that my son wasn't there. You didn't ask whether I was okay. You asked what happened to a cabin you don't own. That's unfair. No, it's uncomfortable. Those aren't the same thing. Ethan took the phone back. His voice was quieter. Dad, I should have been there tonight. Yes. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. Are you? Of course I am. Are you sorry you hurt me? Or are you sorry you found out there were consequences to not knowing anything about my life? He didn't answer. Brooke said something I couldn't hear. Ethan finally whispered, we're coming home tomorrow. You don't need to. I want to talk. Then we'll talk when you're home. Dad, enjoy the rest of your night. Wait. What? His voice cracked. Did you really give all that money away? Most of it. Why, Owen? I didn't give it to Owen. You know what I mean. I gave it to a place where kids will learn skills that can change their lives. But you named it after his dad. Yes. Another silence. Why him? I looked at David's pocket knife beside Carol's photograph. Because his father taught me that love is a verb. Ethan didn't answer. Good night, son. I hung up. At 11:30, Brooke posted something online. One of my former coworkers sent me a screenshot. It showed a vineyard at sunset with the words, never let people weaponize money to punish you for choosing your own happiness. Toxicity can come from older generations too. I stared at it for 10 seconds, then deleted the screenshot. That was the first time in years I chose not to defend myself. The old Robert would have called Ethan. The old Robert would have explained. The old Robert would have spent the whole night worrying about whether Brooke thought I was a good person. That man had become exhausted. The next afternoon, Ethan and Brooke pulled into my driveway. They had changed flights and come home early. I watched them through the front window. Ethan looked terrible. Brooke looked furious. She walked ahead of him, carrying a designer purse and sunglasses she hadn't bothered, removing even though the sky was cloudy. I opened the door. Come in. Brooke stepped into the living room and immediately noticed the retirement plaque on my mantle. Where are the kids? I asked. My parents have them. Of course they did. Ethan stood near the family photo wall staring at a picture of the four of us at Lake Norman when he was 22. Carol had her head on my shoulder. Ethan was sunburned. Everyone looked happy. I forgot about this picture, he said. Your mother loved it. Brooke dropped her purse onto a chair. Can we please talk about what happened? Sure. I went into the kitchen and poured iced tea. Brooke didn't want any. Ethan accepted his, but never drank it. We sat around the same table where I had spent that Thanksgiving night cleaning dishes alone. Brooke started, I'm going to be direct. That would be new. Ethan glanced at me. Brooke stiffened. Was that necessary? Probably not. You clearly have a lot of resentment. I'm beginning to. Then why didn't you say something? I thought about that. Because every time I was disappointed, Ethan thanked me for understanding. Ethan lowered his eyes. Brooke crossed her arms. People have busy lives. I know. We have children. I know. We can't organize every decision around you. I never asked you to. Then what exactly do you want? Nothing anymore. That stopped her. What does that mean? I leaned back. For years I wanted dinners, phone calls, a seat at school events, maybe an invitation to my own cabin once in a while, instead of a request for the keys. I wanted Ethan to call occasionally without needing something fixed. I wanted to be included in family photographs taken inside my own home. I wanted very ordinary things. Ethan looked up sharply at the family photograph comment. Brooke's face changed. She remembered. That was years ago. Yes, you're still upset about a picture? No, I'm upset about what the picture showed, Ethan whispered. Thanksgiving. I nodded. He covered his mouth. Brooke rolled her eyes. This is exactly what I mean. You're collecting grievances. Actually, I spent years doing the opposite. I reached for my phone. Let me show you something. I opened our text thread. March 3rd. Ethan. Dad, can you pick Logan up? We're stuck downtown. I said yes. March 20th. Dad, any chance you could look at our garbage disposal? Yes. April 9th. Dad, can we use the cabin for Brooke's sister's birthday? Yes. May 6th. Dad, plumber says the repair is $1,800. Can you cover it until payday? Yes. May 27th. Dad, can you keep the dog? Yes. I scrolled. Here's one from me. June 2nd. Want to grab breakfast Sunday? No answer. Ethan stared at the screen. I continued. June 11th. Haven't seen you guys in a while. Everything okay? You replied 3 days later with a thumbs up. Brooke shifted in her chair. September 18th. You asked for the cabin again. I said yes in 4 minutes. October 2nd. I asked whether you wanted to watch the Panthers game. No answer. I set the phone down. That's not a relationship, Ethan. That's a service line. His face had gone pale. Brooke said, families help each other. I looked directly at her. Yes, they do. She realized the trap too late. You're making everything transactional. No, you did that the moment the first thing you cared about was what you might inherit. I never said it was mine. You called it Logan and Mia's inheritance. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Dad, I didn't know you felt like this. That's the point. Why didn't you tell me? Because I shouldn't have to explain to my 69-year-old son that his father would like him to attend his retirement dinner. Silence. He stared at the table. You promised you'd come. I know. Then 24 hours before it, you chose wine country. I know. And when I reminded you the chair beside me had your name on it, you told me not to make you feel guilty. His eyes filled. I know. Brooke stood. This has gone far enough. Ethan didn't move. We're not going to sit here while he makes you feel like a horrible son. Ethan looked up at her. I was a horrible son. She froze. Ethan, at least lately, you're emotional. No, I'm listening. To a guilt trip. Stop calling everything that makes us uncomfortable a guilt trip. I'd never heard him speak to her that way. Brooke stared at him. So now you're choosing him over me? Ethan laughed bitterly. Why does someone always have to be chosen over someone else? Because he literally chose another man's son over you in front of hundreds of people. No, I said quietly. She turned toward me. Owen chose to come. Brooke grabbed her purse. Unbelievable. Ethan stayed seated. Are you coming? She demanded. He looked at her, then at me. Not yet. Ethan, I need to talk to my dad. Her jaw tightened. Fine. She walked to the door, then turned. Robert, I hope making your point was worth tearing apart your family. I didn't raise my voice. Brooke, my family has been slowly tearing apart for years. I just stopped pretending the loose pieces were still attached. She slammed the door. Ethan sat there for nearly a minute without speaking. Then he started crying. I'd seen him cry when his mother died. I'd seen him cry when Logan was born. This was different. He looked ashamed. Dad, I really thought you'd always be okay. I nodded. I know, you're so independent. I am. You never complained. No. Every time I canceled, you said you understood. I did understand. He looked confused. Then, understanding why someone hurts you doesn't make it hurt less. He covered his face. God. I waited. Eventually, he said, I think I used your patience as permission. The sentence sounded so much like something Carol might have said that my chest tightened. Yes, I answered. You did. He looked toward his mother's photograph. She would hate who I've become. Don't do that. What? Don't use your mother to beat yourself up. She loved you. Would she be disappointed? I could have lied. Yes. His eyes closed. But she would also tell you tomorrow still belongs to you. He nodded slowly. Can I fix this? That was the question I had secretly wanted for years. Yet when it finally came, my answer surprised both of us. I don't know. His face fell. I thought you'd say yes. The old me would have. What does that mean? It means I love you. That hasn't changed. But love isn't the same thing as access. He looked at me. From now on, I'm not the automatic babysitter. I'm not the emergency wallet. I'm not handing out keys to anything because somebody suddenly wants a weekend away. I'm not hosting holidays where I'm treated like catering staff. And I'm not going to chase invitations to events where everyone else somehow counts as family before I do. He swallowed. Okay. Don't say okay because you want this conversation to end. I don't. Then understand something. I am not punishing you. I know. I'm changing what I'm willing to participate in. What about Logan and Mia? I love them. They can call me. They can visit me. I'll always be their grandfather. But nobody is going to use those children to make me accept being disrespected. He nodded. Fair. Your wife will probably disagree. She already does. That's between you and Brooke. You're not asking me to leave her? Absolutely not. You're a grown man. I spent too many years letting other people decide what my role should be. I'm not going to decide yours. That evening, Ethan stayed for dinner. Nothing dramatic happened. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup because that was what we had. He washed the dishes without being asked. Before leaving, he stood at the door and hugged me. I am sorry about last night. I know. I'm going to do better. Don't promise me. He looked hurt. Then what? Do it. The next few weeks were messy. Real change usually is. Brooke stopped speaking to me. She removed me from one family group chat, though Ethan added me back 2 days later. She posted vague quotes about boundaries, manipulation, narcissistic parents, and protecting your household. I never responded. Several relatives called asking for my side. I told them there wasn't a side. Ethan and I are working through some things. That disappointed them because people enjoy family conflict much more when everyone provides quotes. Owen worried the publicity had caused trouble. I never wanted to get between you and Ethan, he said. You didn't. It feels like I did. Owen, you sitting beside me didn't create an empty chair. The chair was empty before you sat down. He never apologized again. The David Parker Center project moved forward quickly. Owen's students became involved in designing storage systems and workstations. Retired Hawthorne technicians volunteered as mentors. Local electricians donated equipment. A tool company offered safety gear. For the first time since Carol died, my calendar contained things I actually looked forward to instead of errands people had assigned me. I joined a Tuesday morning fishing group. I volunteered at the technical school twice a month. I replaced the old flower beds at my house with vegetables because I'd always wanted a garden, and Brooke used to say vegetables made the yard look messy. At 69, I discovered tomatoes did not care about her opinion. Ethan called every Sunday. At first, the conversations were painfully careful. How are you? Fine. What'd you do today? Worked in the garden. That's good. But he kept calling. More importantly, he started coming. One Saturday he arrived holding 2 fishing poles. Thought we could go to the lake. I looked at him. Which lake? He winced. Fair. I laughed. It was the first time either of us had laughed about the cabin. We drove to a public fishing area on Mountain Island Lake. We barely caught anything. It didn't matter. Halfway through the morning, Ethan said, Brooke thinks you're trying to replace us with Owen. I'm not. I told her that. Good. She says you made us look terrible on television. I never mentioned your names. I know. He stared across the water. That's what makes it worse. I looked at him. How? Nobody had to say anything. That empty seat said everything. I didn't answer. I watched the whole video, he continued. The part where you talked about Owen showing up. I was furious the first time. Then I watched it again. I wasn't angry at you. I was angry because I knew he had. His voice broke. I should know where your coffee filters are. I should know your truck battery's getting old. I should know when you have doctor's appointments. I shouldn't have needed the internet to tell me what was happening in my father's life. No, I said, you shouldn't have. He nodded. No excuses, no defense. That mattered. Thanksgiving arrived 6 months after my retirement. For the first time in decades, I did not host. Ethan asked me in October, "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" Owen invited me to the technical school. Every year, his students hosted a community meal for veterans, widowers, and families who needed somewhere to go. Oh, Ethan sounded disappointed. We were hoping you'd come here. Brooke wants me there? Silence. I'm asking you. That isn't what I asked, he sighed. We're still working on that. Then I'm going where I'm comfortable. Okay. He sounded sad, but he didn't guilt me. Progress. Thanksgiving morning, I woke at 7, made Carol's cornbread stuffing, and carried 2 enormous pans to the school. Owen was already there with his sleeves rolled up. Teenagers were setting tables in the unfinished portion of the future training center. Someone had hung a hand-painted sign that said, "No one eats alone." I stood underneath it longer than I intended. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mia had sent me a photo. She was wearing an apron. "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandpa. Dad let me make Grandma Carol's pie. It looks ugly, lol." I laughed. Then another message arrived from Ethan. A photograph of their dining table. One chair was empty. A handwritten place card said, "Grandpa." Under the picture he wrote, "No pressure, just wanted you to know there will always be a seat here." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I typed, "Thank you, son. That means more than you know." I didn't leave the community meal. I didn't rush across town because one good gesture had suddenly erased 5 years. Boundaries mean nothing if they disappear the moment somebody does the minimum. But something softened inside me. After dinner, Ethan brought Logan and Mia to the school. Brooke didn't come. I didn't ask why. Mia ran straight into my arms. Logan wanted to see the robotics equipment. Ethan spent 2 hours stacking chairs and washing trays. He never asked whether I noticed. I did. Christmas was different too. I spent Christmas Eve with Ethan and the kids. Brooke was polite but distant. I was polite back. No arguments. No fake closeness. I left at 9 instead of sleeping there like I used to. When Brooke's mother said, "You're leaving already?" I smiled and said, "I have plans tomorrow." I did. Coffee with Owen, then an afternoon hike with friends. For the first time, I understood that building a life outside my son wasn't abandoning him. It was refusing to make one person responsible for whether my life felt full. By spring, the David Parker Center was finished. The dedication happened almost exactly 1 year after my retirement dinner. There were no crystal chandeliers this time, no black tie tables, just bright classrooms, new workbenches, polished concrete floors, safety goggles lined neatly on shelves, robotics kits, electrical boards, welding stations, and teenagers trying unsuccessfully to pretend they weren't excited. A photograph of David hung near the entrance. Under it was a simple sentence, "Show up, help somebody, leave things better." Owen had chosen the words. Dad used to say that, he told me. I stood there staring at David's ridiculous grin in the photograph. He usually said it with more profanity. Owen laughed. School board made me edit. At 10 minutes before the dedication, I noticed someone standing near the entrance. Ethan. Alone. He was early. Not 5 minutes early. Not arriving while texting an excuse. Early. He walked toward me holding a small wooden box. "What's that?" "Something I made." "You made something?" "Don't sound so shocked." Inside was a framed copy of the old Thanksgiving photograph Brooke had posted years earlier. The one I had taken. Except beside it, Ethan had placed another photograph taken a few months earlier at my house. Me in the center, Logan leaning against me, Mia laughing, Ethan standing behind us, Owen off to one side holding a plate. Nobody arranged by bloodline. Nobody removed because they weren't immediate family. Underneath, Ethan had engraved a sentence into the wood. "Family is who makes room for you." I looked at him. "You remembered." "I remember a lot now." His eyes filled. "Things I wish I'd noticed sooner. Your mother would like this." "I hoped you would." We hugged. A few minutes later, Owen joined us. Ethan shook his hand. There had once been jealousy between them, though neither man had said it aloud. Now Ethan looked at him and said, "Thank you for taking care of my dad when I wasn't." Owen immediately shook his head. "He took care of me first." Still, Ethan swallowed. Thank you, Owen nodded. You're here now. 4 words. No judgment, no victory, just truth. During the dedication, I sat between them. One man connected to me through blood, one through history and choice. For years, I would have believed sitting there meant my family had finally become whole again. I don't believe that anymore. Whole doesn't mean returning everything to the way it was. Sometimes whole means accepting that a relationship cracked, refusing to hide the crack, and rebuilding only the pieces both people are willing to carry. Brooke and I never became close. She never apologized for Thanksgiving, the posts online, or the way she treated my home like a resource attached to Ethan. Eventually, I stopped waiting for an apology. Ethan and Brooke stayed married, though he admitted they went through a difficult year. That was their marriage, not mine. I learned to stop inserting myself into problems that weren't mine to solve. Ethan learned to stop volunteering me for things without asking. Logan and Mia began visiting on their own more often. Mia helped me plant tomatoes. Logan learned to change the oil in my truck under Owen's supervision, while I sat nearby pretending not to enjoy watching them argue about socket sizes. I never bought another lake house. I didn't need one. The retired couple who bought ours sent me a Christmas card that year. Their grandchildren were standing on the dock wearing life jackets. For half a second, seeing another family there hurt. Then I noticed something in the background. Carol's old wind chime was still hanging from the porch. I had forgotten to take it down. I could almost hear it. Instead of feeling angry, I smiled. The cabin had done what Carol and I bought it to do. It had given people good years. Those years didn't belong to us forever. Nothing does. Not houses. Not children. Not marriages. Not even time. Especially not time. A few weeks ago, Ethan and I were sitting on my back porch drinking coffee. No holiday. No emergency. No favor needed. He had simply stopped by. He looked across my vegetable garden and said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If you hadn't sold the cabin, would you have left it to me?" I considered lying. "Probably." He nodded slowly. "Do you regret selling it?" "No." "Even now that we're better?" "No." He smiled a little. I figured. "Does that bother you?" "It used to." "And now?" He stared at the garden. "Now I think losing the cabin might be the best thing that ever happened to me." I raised an eyebrow. "That's dramatic." He laughed because he recognized Brooke's old word. "Maybe. But I spent years thinking being your son meant I automatically had a place in your life. I thought your house would always be here. Your cabin would always be here. You would always answer. You would always say yes. I never realized relationships can expire even when love doesn't." That sentence stayed with me. "I don't think ours expired," I said. "No." He looked at me, but I came closer than I knew. We sat quietly after that. Eventually, he stood and headed toward his truck. Halfway down the steps, he turned. "Breakfast Sunday?" I smiled. "What do you need?" He laughed. "Nothing." "Then yes." He pointed at me. 8:30. I'm paying. "We'll see about that." He drove away, and I stayed on the porch thinking about the night everything changed. For months, people told me I had taught Ethan a lesson by selling that cabin. They were wrong. I wasn't teaching him anything. I was finally learning something myself. Love doesn't require you to volunteer for disrespect. Being a parent doesn't mean surrendering your dignity forever. Generosity stops being generosity when people treat it as an obligation. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a relationship is stop carrying both ends of it. I spent years terrified that setting boundaries would make me lose my son. What I didn't understand was that I had already been losing myself. The night Ethan left my retirement chair empty, I finally stopped asking what I could do to make my family choose me. I chose myself. And strangely enough, that was the first decision that gave my son the chance to choose me freely too. So tell me honestly, was I wrong to sell the lake house and stop being available to people who only seemed to remember me when they needed something? Or should a parent keep the door open no matter how many times their own family walks past it?